Welcome, everyone. I'm Heather Venegas, and you're listening to King County Recovery Conversations, a place to celebrate recovery and help break the stigma of addiction and mental health. I'm in the studio today with Brett Lovins.
Hey there.
Hey there. So fun to get to do this, to be
Yeah.
together here and have this conversation. Thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
I was lucky. I got to talk with Brett a bit earlier today, so I am excited about knowing where our conversation is going to go. Where would you like to start, Brett?
Well, I'd like to just put the three words recovery-friendly workplace right up front.
Awesome.
Because I'm a big advocate of this idea that, these three words mean something very, very significant to me, to you, and to others, but the brand of it needs some help. And so I'll just say right up front, recovery-friendly workplaces is my jam, and I'm stoked to talk about it at every opportunity. So
Fantastic. And this is the month of January 2025, and I know that you're currently doing something for Dry January.
that's right. So one of the things that we decided to do with our newish business was offer a dry January experience for corporations, right? And we were kind of late to finding clients, but we did land one client, which was great, and we learned a lot. But what I love about dry January is that so many people are doing it. It's so mainstream, and I joke with my partner Nell that it's kind of a great Trojan horse because I'm a big advocate of sober curious. I'm not trying to advocate people do anything in particular other than get curious. And when they get curious, have accurate information and have the kind of support that they would potentially need so that somebody like me who's 11 years sober could potentially find their way to that if they needed it sooner. So I love doing Dry January. I love what it's become in the United States and elsewhere. And it's been really fun to do that with a corporate group of folks. And listening to what they're gaining from it's been awesome. Yeah.
I read a post recently about Dry January, and now I'm not going to remember his name. It's the actor that plays Spider-Man, and he is now sober for quite some time, and he got started with Dry January, and he just kept going, and he was talking about how great it felt, and the longer he did it, the more he realized like his relationships were getting better, his work was getting better, he physically felt better, and he just kind of kept going, like 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, and he said, I'm going to do it for a year, and then maybe I'll stop. And then he was like, why would I stop? I feel better than I ever had. And life is amazing in recovery. And I thought that was really great to see his story that started with a Dry January.
Yeah. He wouldn't be the first that, found their way to, abstinence or sobriety or whatever through Dry January. And several of the people that we've interfaced with are clearly considering that right now. They're not looking at it as a finish line and just to get across and get right back to drinking. They're thinking, wow, this is actually pretty cool, and I love that. I love that about Dry January. Yeah.
You also mentioned something about a 30-day challenge. Is that in connection with Dry January, or is that something that happens afterwards?
Well, I think that we're going to offer. So I'm a big believer in corporate America and in businesses. You look at what businesses do. They get together and they do things, right? Maybe it's a puzzle room, or maybe they go on a ropes course, or, these things that we can do to connect with one another. And, in the good news is in businesses, I think there's more awareness around wellness and inclusivity than there's ever been. And yet the quiet one is usually this idea of no alcohol. There's a lot to be gained there in corporate America, in my opinion, and in my experience, both. So I think one of the offerings that we're going to offer for a company is to experience a Dry January as a team. Because it's one thing to do it on your own, and that's great, or with a family member, even better, or with a group, even better. But since we spend so much time at work, it stands to reason that could potentially be a way for an organization to do a wellness challenge. And have it be a sober curious, potentially, if not completely dry, maybe damp, but to give a group of people that work together an opportunity to have a wellness that's not just, running or walking or whatever, but instead that one. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So
that sounds really fun. We're going to be doing a team building thing next month at the WRA, the Washington Recovery Alliance, but not anything that fancy, but wonderful.
Yeah.
Brett, tell me how you got to be sitting in this chair with me today. What in your life led you here?
Yeah. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that I've been sober 11 years, which blows my mind all the time. I'm so grateful that I found my way out of a big mess with substance use. Alcohol was my main gig, but if there were other things around, I was likely very interested. But in my case, I joined a large corporation, Cisco Systems, 80,000 employees in 2011. And for most of us, it's a progressive condition. Some people get uncomfortable with the word disease, so I'm careful with my words. So condition, whatever you want to call it, I had it. And what that means is it was accelerating and picking up speed. That's the same thing. Anyway, it's a progressive, accelerating condition, and I had it. And so the last 2 years, though I'm working at an IT company that's successful, and I'm delivering on things, and I'm definitely a very productive employee. Though maybe if I hadn't been drinking, I would have been more productive. That's another thing entirely. But suffice to say, my reviews and stuff were very solid. While simultaneously, I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And so some things happen, and I have a podcast too. If you want to hear my stories, you can go hear the whole story there. But I found my way through a window of opportunity. I'd spent 7 years trying to do the M word, moderate, and the metaphor I shared with you earlier is,
please share.
Yeah, it's for somebody like me who can't moderate. Like, I could never get to the word alcoholic. I was so resistant to any of those kinds of words, addiction, alcoholic, whatever. But what I could finally get to is I'm incapable of drinking a little. Right. And that was a 7-year journey. And for me, the metaphor I like to use is, if you can imagine being in a race car or whatever, and you're stomped down on the accelerator and the brakes simultaneously, that's what it feels like. It's just tumultuous and hard, and in my case, a daily failure. So 30 days of the month, I'm going to be drunk 30 days. So that's what I did. So I got my window of opportunity. I got through it. And then I experienced Cisco corporate environment through the lens of somebody in what we call early sobriety.
Right.
And if you've been around this for a while, and you and I both have,
that's right?
Early sobriety is kind of a different animal. In my case, I had been drinking heavily and doing drugs for most of my life, since at least 16, and the things that you do in those early months, it's tricky business.
Yeah, hanging on by your fingernails sometimes.
For some, that's not my particular story. It's more the interfacing with the world. I wasn't hanging on to the cravings. Thankfully, I'm one of those people that the cravings were quick to leave, which was huge. Cravings are suffering.
Yeah.
But being social, doing things, it was all very weird and uncomfortable, right?
Totally.
You reckon?
Oh, yeah. I felt like naked, and like I had a major identity crisis. I remember going shopping one day and got in the store, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I like. What do I like? I don't know what I like. It was so strange, and I didn't know what to get. And oh yeah, I felt so gawky. Social things were just awful. And I mean, that's part of what I started using and drinking for in the first place, right? Was I got funny. I was outgoing and popular when I was using. I started at 13.
13 too.
Yeah. So yeah, it was terrifying and horrifying and anxiety producing to be anywhere without a drink in my hand.
Yeah.
I drank a lot of soft drinks, I remember, like full sugar, everything, and a lot of caffeine too, a lot of coffee.
Whatever it takes to put some distance, right? And that's what I think too. And for most of us with substance use disorder, which I do like saying, that's the first time that's crossed your ears. Probably on your channel it's not, but some of the people that I might share this with, it's just a lot less black and white. It's a lot less of a line. I'm either addicted or I'm not addicted. I'm either an alcoholic or I'm not an alcoholic. And not to say those aren't reasonable monikers, certainly they can be. But for me, I think back to myself, and I was really at war with those words. And so substance use disorder is a way to kind of look at it as more of a gradient, this area of gray area from extremes. And so I had substance use disorder heavily. And so there I was, like you described, trying to find my way. Do you want me to tell the story I shared with you earlier?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So as fate would have it, the part of the business at Cisco that I worked in, we would go to this yearly conference called Cisco Live, and it's a huge conference. They have them all over. They have, I think it's 4 locations in the world, but the U.S. one is the big one. And so me and I think there were 20,000 people there. Go to, in this case, it was in Orlando that year. And I got sober on May 28th, 2013. And I flew into Orlando, Florida for yet another Cisco Live. This was my third. This time sober with about 20 days of, we're back to early sobriety, right?
Really early.
So the first thing that I'm told to do is go to a team dinner. So I drop my stuff off at the hotel and I go to the team dinner, and it's in a Greek restaurant. And again, early sobriety. I still don't know anything. People know me as somebody who drinks. Team meeting. My boss, her boss, and his boss are at this team meeting, team dinner, celebration, right? And there's about 70 people around this giant table, and they've got the Greek music cranking, and they've got a belly dancer in the center of the table. And the next thing you know, my boss's boss triumphantly and with enthusiasm asks everybody to stand up on their chairs for a great OPA toast of ouzo. And there's a bunch of staff that have showed up, like scurrying around. Everybody's got a shot of ouzo. So now I'm standing on a chair, holding a glass of, or a shot of ouzo. I know that I can't drink a little, though I know ouzo well enough. I know about every kind of liquor there is on the planet. Well, I know what to do here, right? I'm very familiar with it. What I'm not familiar with is not doing that. And with 20 days sober, that's a tough spot to put an employee in.
Right. And everybody's looking at each other, and you're front and center.
Yeah, and you feel even more, you feel that, right?
Like spotlights, like these spotlights, like that one right there,
Yeah.
shining on you. Like, hello, here's Brett with the ouzo.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I don't remember. I didn't drink it, right? So this idea of early sobriety, for most of us, and again, if this is new to you, I have a condition where if I take a swig, I will likely go right back to where I was.
Me too. Yeah.
And that's a reality that I have to live with, this chronic disease that I have. It's uncurable. If I take a swig, I'm convinced of it. And I don't know what happens if I took that swig, right? And I don't think my boss's boss had any ill intentions by having everybody stand on their chairs. It's just there's a lack of knowledge because everybody who's in recovery or that are sober or, is having trouble with alcohol, it's just, it's not normalized. Shame and stigma keeps us quiet.
That's right.
And especially in the workplace. Hence, recovery-friendly workplaces. Had I taken the swig of that, I don't know what happens. It might have been another 2 years till I got another window of opportunity. It might have been another month, another 10 years. But the bottom line is that to put an employee in that kind of a situation without some knowledge on what you're doing, without some options, is just not, it's not healthy. And it's time for that kind of behavior to be set aside.
Absolutely. And it could be so simple, just having some non-alcoholic options, having water, having soft drinks or mocktails, which are so big these days.
Yeah.
And you're then not placing people in a situation of jeopardy, potentially. Meaning intentional or not,
Exactly.
Completely unintentional.
Totally.
But still, oh my gosh, in Orlando, so like away from home, away from everywhere, where nobody knows you, you're in a hotel room, you got it going on. I mean, that's like permission to play.
Yeah.
But not.
Yeah, well, and the times that I'd been away from home, in the past, I was a pretty solitary drinker at that point. I didn't want to drink in front of people, so I had this trick that I would do when we would arrive at an event. This is horrible. I'm going to give some people some ideas, but it's my reality. So I used to take my suitcase up to my room, unpack it, and then take my suitcase back down to get a taxi to go to the liquor store to fill my suitcase so that I could be in the elevator and not have my boss see that I was carrying up tremendous amounts of alcohol to my room. And then I would drink by myself in the evenings. But if it's okay with you, so that I got through that, right? And so for the next 8 years, I'm a excellent employee. We tend to be really good employees, as it turns out.
The best. We're reliable. We're accountable and responsible. We show up. We take less sick days. We're really motivated to do the work. We're grateful to be there and have meaning and purpose in our life.
Yeah.
What happened?
So 8 years, I through, shame and stigma kept me quiet. So I did what I, even on that first trip, every evening the beer carts roll out, and you just, at least in my case, it was uncomfortable to say no and people ask you why you're not drinking. What other drug do people do that with? Why aren't you smoking? Heather. So 8 years I did that, and I went to events and I went to dinners and meetings and whatnot. And of course, during the pandemic, wine tastings were huge virtually. That was huge, right? And so happy hour and that was all well-intentioned, but because, 80,000 employees and I knew this many people in recovery, zero, huge company. They have the bandwagon of wellness stuff, right? They have it all. But the thing is we talk about mental health, as finally getting its time in the sun, and I'm grateful for that. Well, guess what? Flying in perfect, quiet formation is substance use disorder or addiction or whatever word you want to use there. Very often, at least in my case, to mask mental health issues, I had anxiety issues, and alcohol was my solution.
Often there's a co-occurring situation, yeah.
Right? And so 8 years I did that. And then during that period of time, some things happened where I kind of began to wake up to this idea that maybe this isn't okay. Maybe I should start saying something. And
you saw a film, and it changed the situation for you.
Yeah. 2018, I saw the movie, the documentary called The Anonymous People by Greg Williams. And it is such a beautiful documentary.
Amazing.
And I think I say this is kind of my Rocky movie. When I saw Rocky 2, I'm dating myself. As a young kid, we'd come out into the parking lot and we had our fists up. But you get that dun 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 dun, right? And I felt that way watching that movie, and I've watched it multiple times since then. And the premise of the movie is, why are we the anonymous people?
Right.
Why don't we have the same kinds of parity with other health conditions in the world? Why are people looked down on? And the answers are accessible. There's a lot of reasons, but it doesn't have to stay that way.
No.
And so that movie made a difference. Losing a friend to a fentanyl overdose in about 2020 was another one. And as I went to his wake and I looked around that room and all these people, and I knew that I'd gotten sober and I'd been sober a while. And I kept welling up with emotion, like, why aren't we talking about this? Yeah. Jeff was amazing. His name is Jeff Meyer, and he was an amazing human being from Yakima, Washington. And I'm seeing all these people, and I remember I talked to a few, and I kept breaking up because by then I was okay saying it, but I ran into one guy that was also sober, and it was just like this magical moment that we mourned the loss of Jeff, but at the same time we were both sober, and that felt really good. Surprised how that hit me. But that made a big impression on me. And then his sister became an advocate in Yakima for the disease model, and she is a warrior. And we started talking because we knew Jeff's husband is a good friend of mine. So that was another straw on the camel's back. And then I got my courage up. Do you want me to keep going? I'm talking a lot here,
You're
Heather.
going. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
You found your voice. And what did you do?
One other thing that happened is I took a Dare to Lead class from Brene Brown, which is
awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
She's great.
Have you read Dare to Lead?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I got to take a 24-hour class with a certified trainer of the program. And anyway, one of the main thoughts in this book is that you want to do you want to show up and be seen for your life? Do you want to have courage?
Mhm.
And does courage require vulnerability? It does. And that was a kind of the magic moment where I started contacting the wellness team at Cisco. And I found that leading with stats and stuff was so. But when I started telling little pieces of my story, like the one in Orlando,
Yeah.
you could hear a pin drop, right? Because they knew, right? That's not okay, right? Nobody meant any harm, but because of shame and stigma, people are quiet. And in a void, something fills the void. In this case, the people that are comfortable with alcohol consumption push it. So they said, Brett, well, you want to talk to the entire company? No.
80,000 people? No, I don't want to talk in front of 80,000 people.
Totally. So, but I just kept looking at Brené's work and I said, I'm going to enter the arena.
Daring greatly.
Yep. I'm going to enter the arena on this. And I said, yes. And I spoke to the director of our health and services at Cisco and told parts of my story. And, what happened next is I started getting pings from people.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I'm not the only one who's in recovery at a giant company like that.
Of course not.
Then they let me write a blog, a different organization. And so I wrote a blog that was even bigger because now I was getting pings all the time. And so I started talking to people, well, why don't we start a little group?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of our grassroots thing called Sober Curious at Cisco. And we started doing things like having webinars and it was just magic. And and now we're putting pressure on things, right? Not in a negative way, but just like wake up a little bit. There's some opportunities here. And I've got a lot of those, Heather, but I want to make sure that I'm not just completely dominating the conversation. Anything, yeah.
That's quite all right.
Okay.
I'm fascinated. So a group started forming, you started doing things. What types of outcomes happened as a result of that?
Well, one that I'm particularly, I guess proud is the right word, though that has some sort of a ownership, and that's not it. It's, I'm psyched that this happened, that our group was able, we had 3 people in our core team of the steering committee, because we had a steering committee, who were sales people in sales. Now, sales is notorious in most organizations for being heavy drinking.
Yeah.
And here we had 3 people that were sober and for some extended periods of time. So we arranged to talk to the team that puts on the big sales event for Cisco. It's like 15,000 people. This is a different event. And these people were able to talk to them about what it's like to attend these events as somebody who's in recovery or sober or whatever, or not interested in drinking. And it made an impact. And things started happening with events where they started changing things. And, the last I heard, their last big event, they offered a sober happy hour, which Salesforce has done before as well. And it was the first event to sell out.
That's amazing.
Right? So it's like, there's just normalize this thing.
Right.
And I'll say this too, as somebody, I would have been irritated by listening to me. If you're listening to this and you're irritated, I would have been that way. And if you're like, I don't know, I've sat in all the chairs and, I look at myself as a younger man getting sicker and sicker. And even if I hadn't gone to the sober happy hour, and even if I hadn't ordered a mocktail at an event, even from a distance, that would have influenced me. It would have started to normalize the concept that I see people over there enjoying an evening together and they're not drinking. Now, I probably would have found somebody to badmouth them, right? But that small voice in me that knew things were not going well needed some support, needed some opportunities to find my people, to own my situation. And I'm just a huge believer in it. Can we change it to the Mariners now?
I was just thinking, yeah, let's talk about the Mariners.
Over to you, because that's your gig, and it was so impressive.
Okay, what Brett is referring to is Recovery Day at the Mariners, which we at the King County Recovery Coalition and Washington Recovery Alliance started working on in the end of 2018 and held our first event the following summer, and have done so every year since, except for when the pandemic prevented us from holding an event, and getting together with so many people. And it's one of my favorite days of the year. And we bring people in recovery, their loved ones, their families, their kids, allies, people that work in the behavioral health field together. And we recover out loud and proud. We have a recovery rally. We have people sharing their stories. We have signs that say things like "End the Stigma." We do recover, march to the game at T-Mobile Park, where we come together with over 2,000 people. It's been as many as, I think, 2,750. And this last year we had just under 2,200, I believe, from all over the state and from Oregon and British Columbia. And one of my favorite things as project manager of this event is, working on it, all year, and then day of getting there and then walking along the concourse. We're in the nosebleed section, and seeing all the people that are in our, special custom Seattle Mariners Recovery Day T-shirt. And often there's little tiny kids that have our shirts on or have our, like this year was Team Recovery, hashtag Team Recovery. Hats on, and everybody is having fun. The kids run the bases at the end of the day. We have our recovery video and people in recovery throwing the first pitch up on the Jumbotron, and it always takes my breath away that I'm standing here in this huge stadium and we are visible, saying, yeah, we're in recovery. And so are, probably many, many, many people in the stadium. One of our goals has been to do a stand for recovery during that special event where the announcer says, if you or someone you love is in recovery, please stand, for 5 seconds or whatever it would take, just so we could see that visual representation of how many people are touched by recovery in a 30, 40,000 people stadium. So far, we haven't gotten to do it yet, but I'm hopeful. It's one of the greatest things I get to do in my job. I love that day. And, it's powerful. I've heard so many people who have shared what their experience is coming with family members, having their son throw the first pitch. We had one year, it was a father and his son who was in Little League. The dad was in recovery, had been a diehard Mariners fan had since he was little and went with his parents, and what that meant to them. Or I've had people that have said they've been united with friends from, decades ago in their life, and they found each other again at our Recovery Day at the Mariners event. It's just magic. So,
well, I got to experience magically as somebody who wandered in with my sister, who of course is one of my cheerleaders and advocates, who watched me go down and then recover, right? And what you just said was my experience. I got choked up a few times.
yeah.
All those green shirts. And I think again about Brett as a younger guy. I'd have been across the stadium there. I might have been bad mouthing it, but it was visible.
Right.
And it would have planted seeds. And I'll hit your audience with a couple of stats, right? Like there's in the US, there's 6% of us that are walking around, and there's about a third that don't drink for whatever reason. But then there's about 17% that really need help, and 10% really, really need help.
Yeah.
And, I didn't want to be somebody who was addicted to drugs and alcohol. I didn't set out to do that.
That was not my aspiration in life either.
No. And when I discovered that, my willpower was of no use to me, as soon as you start to understand that this condition is a brain disease and it can be treated in many different ways. There's lots of ways to do it. But as soon as you start to understand this is a treatable condition that doesn't go well if you have it, it gets worse and worse. It did for me. My elevator went as far down as I wanted it to go, and I've heard a lot worse stories. But when I think about the workplace and I think about what I got to see there with the Mariners game, I see more visibility.
Right. And that's an opportunity for us to spread hope. And I think that's one of the things that is vital, because I think there's a lot of people that maybe don't think they deserve help or that help is possible or available or that they even could recover. Yeah. And so anytime that we can be out in public and be visible and share about our stories and show having fun together in recovery and to be well received, that makes a huge difference and helps stamp out that stigma. What are you doing today? I know you're no longer with Cisco. Is that correct?
That's
what
right.
Happened? What are you doing?
The IT has been getting hammered with layoffs. Me and 11,000 of my closest friends were laid off in April, and so the work that I did at Cisco for 3 years with recovery-friendly workplaces stuff. I didn't even know there was a thing called recovery-friendly workplaces. And please Google that. Recovery-friendly workplaces. You're going to discover it starts with a Republican in New Hampshire. So it is truly a bipartisan thing. It doesn't discriminate, this disease. So I just throw that out there.
Absolutely.
But so that those 3 years that I did that stuff at Cisco, I decided, you know what? They gave me some walk-in money. I'm really a big believer that companies in corporate America can do a lot of good by addressing it for their employees and their families in ways that they're missing. And I'll say this too, at the top of the call, at the top of this interview, I said, I want to start with recovery-friendly workplaces. I've gotten a chance to speak with many HR professionals in medium and large companies. To a person, none of them have heard of that saying or that 3 words. And by not knowing that, you don't know that there's lots of resources, including from the federal government, that's got this killer thing called the Recovery Ready Workplace Toolkit that's like a recipe on how you do this thing. And one of the pillars is hiring people that are in recovery.
Yeah.
Which is what we talked about a minute ago. So yeah, I'm doing this. I'm trying to do this work. I'm speaking at a Rotary Club in my hometown of Yakima on Thursday. My dad will be in the front row. I want to affect change as much as possible in businesses that have opportunities to make a huge difference. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Brett.
My pleasure.
Thank you for answering the call, for hearing it, and for getting in the arena and daring greatly. I'm excited to see what comes next.
And I love working with the WRA. I think we're going to be working more this year together. So, and thank you for the work you do as well. And isn't it great to be sober? Isn't it nice not to have all that noise in our head today as we leave here? Isn't it wonderful?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really grateful that it's been, oh God, I figured it out the other day. I can't do the math that quick. 30 years and, oh my God, several months.
Yeah.
No drugs and alcohol. And I'm super grateful to be a woman in long-term recovery today, and that I'll remember this conversation.
Yeah.
And they'll get to wake up and have another one tomorrow.
Awesome.
Excited to see what the day brings in a way that I can be of service as well.
Yeah.
So, Brett, how can people find you?
Thank you. SoberCuriousConsulting.com is one way. Mm-hmm. Brett Lovins, BrettLovins.com is another way. I have a podcast.
It's called?
It's called Recovery Conversations. Just search for Brett Lovins on any of your favorite podcasts. And one other thing is, I said earlier that that the anonymous people made a huge influence on me. I just confirmed that the maker of that documentary has agreed to be on my podcast in a couple of weeks. The episode will be out probably in a month or two, but that's huge to me.
Congratulations.
It will be such an honor to say thank you to that man. And he's done several movies. Tipping the Pain Scale is another one.
We did a film screening of both those movies here over the years.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So BrettLovins.com is great. So
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brett, for
Thank you.
being my guest today on King County Recovery Conversations. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. If you or a loved one are experiencing substance use disorder, problem gambling, and or a mental health challenge, please visit the Washington Recovery Helpline at warecoveryhelpline.org. For resources, they also have a 24-hour helpline. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Special thanks to our production team at Orbit Audio and to King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division for helping to make this podcast series possible. If you'd like to share your recovery journey with us, please email me at heather@kcrecovery.org. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another story of hope, resilience, and healing. Until then, be well.